Sorry we missed you all in January, so we begin the new year today. I hope everybody's got the agenda. Any addendums or corrections? It's a pretty compressed agenda today, but if anybody has any modifications, now's the time. Seeing none, looking for any declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing and hearing none. The minutes from our last meeting going way back to November the 3rd. Everybody had a chance to look at those? Can we just take them unless there's any comments or concerns? Can we take them as adopted? All right. Moving right along. Our agenda item today, Jana Burns is going to speak to us about the attainable housing strategy from the county. I guess this is what wasn't available at the last meeting, so we're going to hear about it at this meeting, and it's a very important thing for us all to hear about and keep up with. So Jana, without further ado, welcome, and thank you for what we're going to hear, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, committee members. It's a pleasure being in front of you again, and I hope that this finds you all well. And I want to thank you for your efforts when it comes to attainable housing. I know that's, I think, 50% of what you're looking at. So I'm happy to provide an update today with respect to attainable housing and what the county task force has been working on. I'm going to share my screen, and yeah, it looks like I have the ability to do that. So bear with me one second. Okay, you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can do. Can you still see my screen?
So lots of cute pictures. Oh, there they go.
Yeah, those cute pictures. Okay. So let me minimize this. And okay. So there, if you can see my screen, perfect. All right, I'm going to very quickly just again distinguish what we're talking about, since it has been a while since we talked about the county strategy. So we're talking about attainable housing, whereas affordable housing is about government subsidized, operated, below market housing. When we talk about attainable, we're talking about any type of housing, owned or rented, basically where the household living in it isn't spending more than 30% of their income on living there. And before we get into what we've been doing at the county, I thought it was valuable to look back at what Wellington County residents, Center Wellington residents said in 2019 when we surveyed them. So the question we asked was, can you afford to purchase a home in your community today? And this flashback, I think, is an important one. It's a bit of a shocking one, but you can see that 90% of local residents that responded said they couldn't afford to purchase a home in 2019 when we did the survey. And I think about that sliding scale that you're looking at and how hard it is to find a home in that highest category today, that 500,000. And obviously this problem hasn't disappeared, and nor have the people whose reality this is. And again, the reason why your committee's commitment to attainable housing is so important is because this affects the individuals that work in our local businesses. And I think it's important to raise that point again. So we know that the average household income in the county is 120,000. And as you know, that differs from Wellington North to Center Wellington to Aberfoyle, for example. But parallel that with the average price to buy a home right now in the county is 820,000. So it means to purchase that average $820,000 home, you have to be making 160,000 household income to be able to purchase that home, which is 40,000 more than the average household income right now. So now I'm going to present you with a list of the work underway to date, some of which were direct recommendations from our strategy. So as you know, we have the housing task force dedicated at the county level. The warden sits on that and provides us with strategic direction. And then in July of last year, we updated our official plan at the county and permitting additional residential units. So that it permits up to 3 units on a property. It's, I think it's really straightforward. I think it's easy to implement. Every municipality has passed that, and it's a good way for rural communities to help with our objective to increase our local stock of rentals. We also have been having discussions with our developer community, and actually your committee started that off with the meeting that we had with developers in your immediate community, and I thank you for that. And then, as you are very well aware, multi-res development has a negative connotation associated with it. And we have a public awareness campaign that we're working on to really change public opinion. So we're using real stories to drive the point home that if your child's teacher that you absolutely adore can't live locally because she can't afford it and she can't do the commute anymore either, your life will be impacted. Or your favorite restaurant will close because they can't keep a chef. It impacts you. So stories that resonate with people's own lives, and I'll provide details to the campaign in a few slides, but really providing an opportunity to address resident concerns and have conversations with them. And then we also had a recommendation in our strategy to amend our county CIP to include attainable housing incentives. So we started this project in January. We're doing it in conjunction with the township, working with Brett and with George to address deficiencies in our current programs. And we know we need to be strategic with what we're supporting. Incentives aren't going to also make or break every single project, and they can also be administratively cumbersome, but I think they're a really clear indication to property owners and developers as to what the municipality cares about. And some grants can be really effective, especially those that reduce the upfront costs. So we know also it's more realistic to assume that the existing rental stock will be more on the attainable side. I think it was Taylor McDaniel who had said that 75% of the rentals in Center Wellington were built by 1979. So we want to support the renovation of those projects in our CIP, and we also want to encourage developers to build new multi-res units to increase our local stock. And we want to update our CIP to reflect new policy directions, so encouraging a variety of housing typologies. And in total, across the county over the past year, just a little bit over, we've had 12 new above commercial downtown residential CIP grant recipients, which is great, and we really want to encourage that. So this next project didn't originate from our attainable housing strategy, but it is a project I've wanted to do for a while now, and I think it has great significance to our subject. And it's undertaking a welcoming communities exercise in Wellington County that we're doing parallel to this project. So to help assess the extent to which Wellington County communities are welcoming and inclusive to anyone who doesn't already live here, last year we surveyed 327 newcomers as well as some residents, and then we provided the same survey to 65 business owners. And then for context on the new immigrant side, we have about 598 immigrants who have come to Wellington County over the past 5 years. And then we have a total of 3,500 visible minorities in Wellington County, regardless of when they came. But remember that this survey didn't focus on immigrants. It focused on anyone who recently joined our community. And we asked everything from feelings of inclusion in the community to broadband services and local amenities. So in terms of perceptions of how welcoming Wellington County is, you can see that 75% said overwhelmingly, Wellington County is a Wellington place. Pardon me. And then when we asked, what are your top 3 reasons for choosing to live here? Number 1, you can achieve the desired lifestyle. There were some family ties or business connections and that feeling of safety. And then we asked them what their major challenges were. And overwhelmingly, it was obtaining housing in the community. And this differed it didn't differ in any of the categories, but there were differences when it came to newcomers. For example, newcomers said that they felt it was challenging to find food that they were used to seeing or felt comfortable having in their country of origin, for example, when they came to a supermarket here, or that it was difficult to connect with other ethnic groups in the community, or that sometimes they felt that the community was cliquey, which I don't think is a surprise. And there is a belief among some respondents interviewed that there are some residents in the communities that are harboring negative views against certain minority groups. So it is suggested that more positive messaging be promoted in the media about newcomer communities to help counteract some of these negative perceptions. And then some newcomer business owners reported that they find it's hard to feel accepted as an outsider, and understanding the Canadian culture can be a major challenge. And then something else on our side for development is 65% said they were not, business owners were not aware of the different immigration programs through which they can recruit newcomers, and 55% said they have not collaborated with employment or settlement services as a source for recruiting newcomers. So I'm sharing this with you because as we develop programming to support the individuals that we surveyed through this Welcoming Communities exercise, I think it's important to keep in mind that all of this is related. Being welcoming to me means being open to hearing about how we as a community can do things better. Okay, so also on our housing strategy recommendations were discussions with member municipalities for locating areas in the county to support an innovative housing pilot. We know that coordinating this work with our member municipalities is really important. They're helping us with the CIP. We also want to identify pockets for rezoning to permit higher density builds, and we want to look at sites for a potential pilot as well. And we've had a few conversations with a developer that has an innovative model for home ownership for the middle household income brackets, and we want to further those conversations with a few other municipalities this month. And then also we want to streamline our planning approval process. So looking at our procedures or any constraints or opportunities for reducing costs that can be passed on to buyers and to renters, and looking further into the community planning permit system as well. And then we want to strengthen the language in our planning documents around modular or other types of builds, and looking at bylaw exemptions, and working closer with our local zoning bylaws as well. And I think everybody is looking at this subject. The federal government wants to challenge investment property purchase and make it purchases and make it easier to develop co-op housing. The province has a task force dedicated to this as well. And we most recently had the opportunity to meet with Minister Clark to discuss the budgetary constraints put on municipalities when they have to provide the guarantee for the Infrastructure Canada loan on new attainable housing builds. So this is something that everybody's talking about. What we're grateful to have a dedicated team at the county working on this. So one other very important part of this is the public awareness campaign, as I mentioned earlier, and I want to provide some details as to one of the opportunities that we took in November with the Poverty Elimination Task Force to receive training on YIMBYism. And this campaign arose because when the planning approval process prioritizes neighboring homeowners' concerns and a development doesn't take place, it doesn't help our community, it doesn't help our economy, as you know. And we want to help our local councils every time that they're provided a planning application that meets our countywide objectives and policies when they're confronted with NIMBYism. And sometimes it can be more like banana, which you might have heard about, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone. And part of developing our public awareness campaign, which means, as I said, hearing from our community and being able to speak about this subject, means getting trained on YIMBYism, which is, yes, in my backyard. So we had training. We included the municipalities, our council, our economic development partners, everything from the Ministry of Economic Development, Ministry of Agriculture, Local Immigration Partnership, Workforce Planning Board. So the people that are already having these discussions within their own networks, and we invited them to take part. And so it gave everyone the opportunity to get educated on this, and to also provide them with the material and the style, I suppose, they need to speak effectively about this issue. So really showing the positive impacts when we're open to different builds from different build forms in our community. So we did some myth debunking in this exercise, and I thought it would be interesting to raise them with you today. So one of the myths that is brought up often is that when a high-res development happens in the community, my property values will go down. And there is no research to support this. And new developments can often help beautify a community with new or rehabilitated properties. The next myth, it'll increase crime and make our community less safe. And again, no research to support this. And the belief is often based on negative stereotypes about future residents or false assumptions that this housing isn't good for a community, when in reality, many existing high densities are close to schools and supported by the community. The third one, attainable housing projects fall under a different planning process as other housing development. And this is false. These projects fall under the same planning and community consultation process as any other development. And if there is no special planning approval needed, consultation is not required. If it is needed, the developer has to consult the immediate neighborhood about the land use, but not about how the building will be managed or who will live there. Fourth, the best way to support or build support for a particular project is to maximize community consultation and awareness about the issues during the planning processes. And this is actually false. It's important that people understand what they have a say over, and that consultation is more about land use, which is why we're doing this campaign. Fifth, new residents will not fit into the community and will lose our character. So inclusive communities, as we know, provide housing opportunities for everyone, and good design that respects planning guidelines and regulations will create a successful project that supports the existing character of a neighborhood. And attainable housing, like any other development, has to comply with the same building code standards for physical condition and quality. And then traffic and parking are going to be a problem. With any new development, a higher density or infill housing proposal has to meet certain municipal planning and engineering standards, which help to ensure harmony between a proposed development and the surrounding community, including when it comes to traffic. So often residents that live in multi-residential units, as we know, own fewer cars and drive less. And then finally, increasing density will strain public services and infrastructure. And high-res density housing generally requires less extensive infrastructure than low-density development for things like piped water and sewer services and schools and roads. And it provides greater capacity for communities to cover the cost of providing infrastructure, which results in more affordability for all reasons. And if we consider how important our downtowns are, high-res density housing can also revitalize local economies and spur community investment. So when everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home, our whole community benefits. And that's really what we were talking about. So when you say yes in my backyard, you support a welcoming community where everyone can access the housing they need free of discrimination, and where others show their support for safe and affordable housing that meets the community's needs and our economic needs at the same time. And it helps to build community support necessary to support project proponents and elected officials to champion projects. So saying yes to accepting our community's collective responsibility is what we're talking about when we say yes in my backyard, and ultimately creating a shared space that's welcoming to everyone. So let's look at our public awareness campaign. So we have a campaign theme, which is Make Wellington County Home, and our tagline is everyone should be able to live here. And our strategic approach is going to be led by humanizing the situation through storytelling. And we'll have a dedicated website, which will be interactive, the opportunity for people to also share their stories. So this will reinforce and amplify the need for housing in the community. And it'll also provide the opportunity for people to share their own story. We'll be dispelling myths like we just talked about, and some biases as well. And it'll be a very highly visual campaign. We're doing a lot of social media, a lot of posters and the like, and we're establishing communications with partnerships as well that are going to be supporting our efforts, like the members that did the YIMBYism training as well, those partners, and then creating opportunities for dialogue as well. So in terms of the campaign look and feel, what you'll be seeing will be things, posters, for example, like the following. So Josh makes a mean carbonara. He's vital to our community. Let's help him stay here. And then that'll bring you directly to our website where the conversation can be started. Another example is providing facts on housing in the community, like our local economy needs to attract employees who can access housing that they can afford. And this is based on several messages that we've decided. So Wellington County needs more housing options now to support our community. We know that that's our reality. Our local economy strongly relies on attracting employees who can access housing. We can have attainable housing and retain the character of our individual communities. There are many community benefits to ensuring diverse housing options. And Wellington County has a history of welcoming others. We've seen this over and over in a variety of projects that we've worked on. That's what we're about. So in terms of the campaign, I mentioned social media and advertising. We will be part of it, talking about the community stories, talking about businesses, which are going to be part of those partnerships that I mentioned, helping amplify this public awareness campaign. We will have media releases, we will have features, and we're also, as I said, going to have an interactive opportunity for people to tell us their thoughts about multi-res housing and different and housing development in general in the community. We'll also be developing an animated video to talk about this project, and then we'll have pamphlets, and importantly, we'll have several opportunities to have the community have those engagements with us in person. So open house type community events starting in the fall. So these are the different types of tactics that we're going to be using. That sounds aggressive, but that's not the intent. As I said, it's a platform to be engaging with the community. Having a presence in the community, I think, will be really important. And we're possibly looking at a museum exhibit as well, talking about how housing has changed in the community over the past decades and what housing looks like now, and how what is in demand now isn't so far from what was in demand in the past. So in terms of our timeline, we will be having our soft launch with the stories in March, which is next month, and we plan on having the full launch starting a month later. And then in the summer and in the fall, doing those community events, having conversations with the community, and having several open houses. So that is the presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to share this with you. The task force at the county will be meeting on in 2 weeks, I believe the 16th, and we look forward to moving forward on this.
Thank you very much. That was that's very exciting, especially that campaign. That looks spot on. And these are great pictures here now. There we go. I like the other pictures better. Sorry, guys. This is all I can say. Anybody have any questions or comments directed to Jana? Brian?
Simple question, Jana. How can we help as members of this committee?
Excellent question. And through you, Chair, thank you, Brian. There will be a multitude of ways that we're going to be relying on the member municipalities to assist us with the campaign rollout. And we're just putting that information together. But rest assured that there will be a role, and we will be communicating that within the next month. So we do meet with our municipal economic development group representing Center Wellington. We have George. So he'll probably be the person that disseminates that information to you, but I'm always available and happy to share information with you as well.
Thank you. That was a good question. And we're probably all interested in that to whatever extent we can be part of that process. That would be a good thing. Welcome, Steve Wright. I see you with us. Hello. Questions? Nico.
One of the things that I haven't heard is the establishment of housing standards to make sure that people that are coming into our county are receiving housing that are appropriate in terms of meeting their needs. And I'll say this, I come out of child welfare, and I have been in some housing units within Wellington County that are absolutely despicable. So I wonder if there is anything underfoot in terms of standardizing housing, in terms of upkeep, that kind of thing.
Jana, is that something you can take on?
Yeah, and I think through you, Chair, I think that might be more on differentiating between attainable housing and affordable housing. So in terms of the standards, I would see that, and maybe we could have a conversation offline, but again, I would see that more on the affordable side in terms of the standards that like we're talking about little intervention except in the beginning of the process for getting our rental stock or our housing stock in general increased. We're not talking about necessarily what's going to be happening or what type of living standards there are once somebody moves in to that place.
Nico, is that okay? I think to that point, we're talking about getting new construction underway for this type of housing, as I understand it. So that's all regulated quite heavily. What you see in the community is the units that have been around a long time and maybe haven't been maintained as well as they should. That is a serious issue, but it's a different issue, I think. Jana, is that fair to say? That, yeah. So that devolves more to health enforcement, bylaw enforcement, that kind of thing for an ongoing situation. I think we can be pretty comfortable that new build is pretty well regulated, building codes and fire codes and safety codes and all of that. So that's when it's in best condition. And then how it's handled and maintained after is an ongoing issue. So hopefully that helps that. Mayor Linton.
Yeah, can I just add a little bit to that? So for the county, economic development is taking the lead on attainable housing. But also at the table is our social services group. And our social services group oversees social housing, it oversees affordable housing, and also all the social programs that are delivered through the county. So because we have social services at our table, there's that viewpoint that Nico is bringing to he's talking about. So as we move ahead on attainable housing, there's lessons that we've learned as a county when it comes to affordable housing and social housing, things that we don't want to see happen in new housing development, most related to affordable housing than attainable housing, but still there's probably lessons learned on the attainable housing side that we have the right people at the county table to provide that lens as well. Because I think that is important. You don't just want to build things that, in 10 years are going to become less than what you intended. And so having those folks, having Eddie and having Mark and having the key county team at the table as we have these discussions, make sure that we bring that perspective, that longer term perspective to the table of making sure that we're building pilots and building projects and being engaged in projects that we're all going to be proud of in 10, 20 years, that they're going to last. So I think it's a good point, and I think we have the right team at the county level to make sure that perspective is taken into account.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Steve Wright.
Thanks, Don. Jana, I was just wondering, as a builder developer, is there work being done with respect to developing very specific, or I'll call it prescriptive processes for building attainable housing? Because as a developer, you kind of look at this as an opportunity to take your pockets of land and oftentimes you have to create I'll call it condominium arrangements to in order to build like up or increase the density of these places. And I'm just wondering, is there movement afoot, or is there processes in place that can be very succinct and prescriptive towards creating a condo as part of the whole site plan and development that would be required to create, like, say, a higher density subdivision or home or site plan within, say, an urban area that might be already zoned like R1A or something. And then the one part of the marketing that I think could be added to your list of ideas is that when a developer or builder creates an attainable housing development, I think it should be celebrated by the county, and it should have a big sort of assistance in as form of marketing it or showing it off and because I know builders and developers would be really proud to have that support and assistance from both municipal and county government. So I think that would be a good idea. And then Nico, you were mentioning the point about standards and people not keeping it up or they're being in decrepit states and stuff. But I think that's the difference between affordable and social housing as opposed to what we're talking about is attainable. And I kind of assume that attainable housing reflects more ownership and that people would own the property. In addition, I understand that there would be rentals, attainable rental units, but that's more or less held by a landlord, and it's up to them to keep up their standards. But as far as ownership is concerned, attainable housing, I think the pride that it comes with ownership is what's going to avoid those developments from being, I'll call it, less than desirable. So I think that's an important aspect of what we're talking about. And as a builder and developer, that's what I want to promote, is the opportunity for people to buy housing that is attainable and within their realm of income. So I think that changes or reflects, Jana, your term of typologies of homes. That's what I think is a good term for meeting that attainable portion. So those are my comments on that.
Thank you. Good comments. Jana, any response or?
Yes, thank you, Chair, through you. To the first point about and I think we heard this from the developers at the meeting, actually, with your committee, developing these guidelines for developers. And those conversations have yet to ensue. We're not at that point yet, but yes, it's still on our radar. We did note that. The other point that you mentioned about sharing the success stories, I think it fits right on our central platform that we're intending on creating too, not just sharing some stories about the additional residential units and how that's benefited a property owner and somebody that has now found housing in our community, but also speaking about the success stories with multi-res units. You're absolutely right, Steve.
Okay. Any other questions? I thought I saw their hands. All right, Brian.
Just a quick clarification. You mentioned the ability now to have up to three residential units on a property. Now, does that apply to any municipality within the county? So I'm just seeking clarification about to whom that applies.
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair Brian. That differs across across the county, I should say. Up to 3 in Minto, and I believe it's 2 in Center Wellington.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, I just have a couple of questions myself. You mentioned there's an ongoing provincial, and I think there is, I agree there is, an ongoing provincial examination of affordable or attainable housing. And I think they've even, in fact, come out with some recommendations already. Is your group in touch with that process? Are you linked to that process in any way? And is anything coming out of that process that may either complement what we're trying to do here or perhaps even overtake it at the provincial level?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Chair. No, we're not part of those discussions. We're listening like everybody else is. We are part of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, and this is something that's really important to that group because they just came up with a fantastic document for a workforce strategy. Housing is #1 in there, and in terms of next steps with that group, we're very close with them. As you know, the Chair of Economic Development at the county is also the Chair of Economic Development for the Western Wardens. So I think we're at the right table, and I think just making sure well, just having the task force at the county and the individuals that are on that at that table certainly helps us be prepared for when we do have opportunities for delegation. I was happy to see how how Minister Clark was receptive to, for example, when the warden, your mayor, presented the opportunities that we see. And I think he did a great job in terms of making it very clear that we're a community that's open to looking at these solutions, because we're not far from the GTA. This was a problem that has been in our community even before the housing crisis is at this point. So I think those conversations and being at the table is important.
Thank you. Yeah, I read somewhere, and I can't tell you exactly where, but it wasn't long ago that they already floated some proposal about allowing, I think, up to 6-unit multiple residents as of right, but in communities of only over 100,000 population. Have you heard that? And is that the kind of thing that they're talking about? And if that's the case, is that the kind of thing that we should be interested in?
Again, a good question. I think I like what we're doing. I think we have to be cognizant of making sure our community is at the same, taking steps the same time that we're taking steps, and just understanding what our need is and having those conversations in our community, having this public awareness campaign, I think is probably the first. I think I like the steps that we're doing, and I think that's really important. I wouldn't want to get ahead of things, and no, we're not, that's something that we haven't talked about at the task force.
Right. Okay. One of the other questions I have was, I think it was in the public engagement process. You mentioned that one of the things you were assuring the public of is that the same planning process or approval process applies to affordable housing projects as it applies to all other projects. How does that mesh with what we're looking at, which is the community planning permit system for these kinds of projects, which I think we're suggesting is a more streamlined and slightly different approval process than the norm? Is that true, or is that something that we need to be up on, or how does that relate to what that aspect of the public engagement process is? Yeah,
I think, Chair, that those two, and again, I would like to say attainable housing and not affordable housing, but irrespective of what it is, I think that the two are congruous, if I can say that. I would probably look at a planner to speak to the specific about that new planning process, because I don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would answer it the same way that I would answer that myth that we're going to be following, that process is the same process regardless of development.
Well, and I think maybe that's the consultation that you need, because we've been looking at it, and it is slightly different in some aspects, and you know, before we go to the public and say one thing and then we turn around and seem to be doing something else, just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that, because it is an interesting planning process, and it's slightly different once it's in place than the normal planning process, if I can say that. And we don't want, I guess, mixed messaging going out from the two levels of municipal government. So I just leave that with you. And if you want to have those conversations with the planner, it might be a good idea just to make sure your task force is fully aware of those distinctions. They may not be significant, I don't know, but just to be aware of it before you go out to the public and then find out something different later. So I'm just throwing that out there. And the only other question I have, and again, it's a sort of a strategic question. You mentioned that one of the focuses of the county task force is looking at streamlining approval processes and planning approval processes throughout the county. And I just wonder if any thought has been given, or if that includes sort of the very broad question of who does what as between the levels in terms of approval processes, you know, subdivision approvals or major development approvals or even infrastructure approvals. Is there potential to streamline that, a potential to remove duplication or multi-level approval, that kind of thing? And you don't even know the details. I just wonder if that's sort of on the radar of the task force, or if you think it should be, or is it something to take into consideration while we're looking at streamlining all our approvals from a developer's point of view, because it's, you know, do you have to deal with one approval, two approvals, one level, two levels of government, that kind of thing. So is that just, my question is simply, is that something that's on the radar or could be on the radar of your group?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Short answer is yes.
Good. That's a good answer. Thank you. That's what we were looking for. All right. That's my questions. Anybody else have anything to add? Don.
Thank you, Chair. For Jana, you mentioned that you're working on the CIP, redoing the CIP, and I think we are as well. Any idea of the time frame?
Thank you, through you, Chair, and hi, Don. Yeah, we hope to have the finished document by the beginning of the summer.
Good. Good.
Nico.
Yeah, just one other question with regard to the issue of affordable and attainable. We seem to have a clear delineation between the two. What about, I mean, we're in a situation now with the pandemic and so on, where that clear delineation between affordable and attainable, I'm not sure if that kind of clear delineation is something that we can still take into consideration. What about people that fluctuate between the two? People in this climate that are losing their jobs or having to give up their businesses, that may, as I say, fluctuate between either being a candidate for affordable housing or attainable housing. Do you take that into consideration, or perhaps Kelly, whether the people that are looking at that, whether they take that into consideration in terms of the instability between the two?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, Nico, that is something that we've talked about a lot at the task force. We have talked about how we want to create a community where there are opportunities for different phases of or stages of life, and that certain accommodations are suited for those different stages. So thank you for bringing it up again, and we'll continue to have those conversations. And as the mayor said, that I think we do have the right people at the table. We do have our director of housing. We do have our director of social services to bring that perspective.
Okay, Kelly.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize the point that Jana made before, how it's really important that we bring the community on side with all the things we're talking about here. We can't skip the step of changing hearts and minds. And that is where the public relations and the public education is so critical. It's so important that we get stories out there, and we can't skip that step. So I'm really excited where the county is going, and making sure that this is not like a propaganda-based approach. It's real life stories of real people who are having a hard time living in the community that they love. And we cannot skip that step. We shared that, what we're doing, with Minister Clark at our delegation last week, and he was quite impressed with all the work that we are doing. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that meeting that we had with Minister Clark, because I think it was really important that we got a message out to the minister. And so I was there, Mayor Bridge was there from Minto, Jana was there, as well as Crystal from Economic Development at the county. And what we wanted to impress upon the minister is that Wellington County is ready to take action on attainable housing. We want to move forward with a pilot project. We've done our homework, we've done our studies, we have our strategy. We don't need to marinate in the problem any longer. We know that it's there. We know something has to be done. And if the province is interested in investing in something that is going to result in an actual project, a pilot project, consider Wellington County. And we were very specific in saying that one of the challenges that we have in moving ahead with a pilot project is that Infrastructure Ontario is requiring the county to guarantee the loan in order to move ahead on that project. we suggested that because it's an attainable housing project, the Ontario government could really help us out by them guaranteeing that loan. So nothing else would change. We'd move ahead on the project, but they would come to the table in some way so that we could, we didn't have to put all our debt up front, and they would help us out on that. So they heard a very clear message from us, and I think that's what sets us apart from the 444 other municipalities that are coming to the government with a very similar problem. And I think that meeting went really well. Jana talked a little bit about the Western Wardens, and the Western Wardens had a multi-minister delegation 2 weeks ago, and attainable housing. So we had Minister Clark there, as well as 5 other ministers in one session. And attainable housing was one of the key challenges that all of our counties were facing. So again, they saw Wellington County come to the table again. And the good thing about this government is they really do care about rural Ontario. It's not all about the big cities, because our challenges are a little different. And so we're getting that message out, and I think us going through that public education process is absolutely critical for our citizens, our residents, as well as our local members of council, to understand that there's another side to the story. And that other side to the story is very urgent and is very important, that we are a community where anybody who wants to live in this community can afford to live. And we have a ways to go, but we know that it comes down to supply. And that's where the difference between attainable housing and affordable housing in some ways isn't that critical. We have to increase the supply of both. And if there's any barriers that the county has, if there's any barriers that the local municipality has in reducing that supply, we have to remove them. And so we're working together. When Jana was talking about the CIP program, the township and the county are working together on making changes to the CIP, Don. So we're not, one hand is still talking to the other. We're working in the same direction, making sure there's consistency in how we're approaching this. And so hats off to both our county and our township staff for working together on this and making sure that we're removing any barriers, whether they're process related, whether they're standards related, whatever it is, we want to get rid of those barriers so that we can move ahead with some real clear action to both county council and our member municipality councils to make some real difference here. So again, I really like the focus is on action, moving forward with a pilot project, because that's the only way that we're going to see real change. So thanks for coming, Jana. It was really good to hear what the county is doing, and that we're doing it in concert with Center Wellington.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns? All right, well, that was a good discussion, I thought, and thank you, Jana. That was a very good, really good to hear where you're moving. And again, I think to echo Brian's point, any way, shape, or form that we as a group or we as a committee can be of assistance to that process, just ask, basically. So we're looking forward to that.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
The next items on the agenda are reports from our committees. The first one is financial incentive. I don't even know, have we had a meeting in 2022 for that yet?
I could tackle that one.
All right.
We haven't had a meeting yet. We have a meeting scheduled for the 22nd of this month. And just to fill in the rest of the group, as Jana alluded to, we've had our kickoff meeting on the county and township CIP updates. That was just 2 weeks ago today, I think. And one of the things that our consultant has just completed another assignment where one of his tasks was to complete best practices review of housing incentives through a CIP. So that's good. We get to use the knowledge that he's gleaned from another project and not have to pay for it because it's already done. So when we meet next week or on the 22nd, we'll be able to bring forward that best practices review and discuss that further. I think at our financial incentives committee before, we had gone through the City of Belleville's CIP and their different programs for housing that they have. And that document was also part of RCI's best practices review. And in fact, Belleville's updated it since. So we'll have that new information to discuss at our next financial incentive subcommittee meeting.
Great, good substance there. Okay, policy and zoning. I think there was a meeting that I missed, as it turns out. Who wants to talk about that? Mariana?
Sure, thank you. Through you, we met a few weeks back, and we had a really good discussion and got into quite a few detailed items within the highway commercial zoning. So we proposed some draft changes and had some really good discussion. So we are proposing to fine tune that and take that back to the next meeting. And I think we should probably have a proposed bylaw change available soon. We're just doing a little bit more work on that, and we're going to investigate a few other matters such as parking reductions, and some urban design issues that came up at our meeting. So we will bring that back to the next meeting. And again, anybody's able to join us for that discussion. So I think that's it, but unless Brett has something else to add, but we are moving forward on that.
Do we have a date for the next meeting?
I think it is in the calendar. Devlin, do you know offhand?
I don't know offhand, but I can look that up and find it for
Okay, thanks. No, it's probably out there somewhere. I just was wondering.
Probably in a couple of weeks' time, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I just had a question too. At the time of that meeting, I know there was some talk or chat going around about short-term rentals again. That's not new. It just keeps coming back. Is that something that the committee did look at or intends to look at anytime soon?
Yes, thanks for the reminder. We had a brief discussion about it. I think we decided on maybe there might be some short-term solutions right now where we can put in some definitions in the bylaw and such. So again, that's something we're exploring, and we will be bringing forward some ideas soon.
Okay, good. So it is in the mix.
It definitely was discussed, yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, any other comments on any of those two items? Councillor Cray.
Just quickly, February 17th is the date of the next policy and zoning committee meeting.
Oh, thank you. Good. So the 17th and the 22nd, and then March the 2nd, I guess, for the full group. I think that's how it works. And just while we're talking dates too, I should have mentioned it while Jana was here. I think I heard somewhere that there's a public meeting for county OP amendments and changes coming up in the next couple of weeks. And I wonder if any housing related policies or things are included in that. Does anybody know, Brett?
I think Mayor Linton might have a little bit more details based on the last planning committee meeting, but it's an amendment that is a very specific requirement of the MCR exercise arising, which is a county level, right. That the upper tiers have to do to put in place the urban structure that aligns with the growth plan. So it's more about changing the terminology in the county OP of the urban structure, the names of the urban centers, settlement areas, those kind of definitions. I think more so than any kind of policy document at this point in time that deals with housing or anything else that might come out of the comprehensive review. It's a very specific, it's part of the staging of the implementation of the MCR that the ministry is allowing municipalities to do just because of the compressed time frame that they've been given to work under. Does that do you have any other information, Mayor Linton?
Well, I just know that it's piggybacked. There's a public session that's piggybacked onto the planning committee meeting on the morning of February the 10th. So information will go out, and I'll dig that up and send it to this group. it's good for you to be aware that it's going on, even if the focus is fairly narrow. It'd be good for if anybody wants to. It'll be a Zoom meeting, so if anybody wants to join in, I'll send that information out to the group.
Okay, thank you. Ultimately, I guess, because I think Jana did mention there will be some policy changes around housing in the county plan. So when those things go through, it would be very good if we paid attention to that while it was happening. So thank you. All right, anything else? Kathy?
I just wanted to ask Brett whether there, because of not being on the committees where we were doing the increase of density that the Ontario government was passing down to us, has there been any change in numbers, Brett, that we have to be concerned about? That was the growth plan, I think I'm talking about.
Yes, if not everybody around the table may remember, I think back in 2017, the previous provincial government was prepared a draft change to the growth plan that would have significantly increased our greenfield density target and increased the intensification target from 20% to 50% for municipalities like us. I know Mayor Linton and the township made submissions to the government of the day that we're opposed to those kind of changes. They heard that from many other municipalities as well. But when they passed the growth plan, those things were intact but they've since been reversed by the current government. So the latest version of the growth plan, it's more or less status quo as far as the greenfield density. They've made some changes to the manner in which it's calculated. So it's too early to say that it's absolutely the same, but they haven't changed the overall greenfield density target. They have made provision for municipalities through their MCR, and it's the upper tier, the county, that has to do this exercise to ask for a lower intensification target or a different intensification target. Otherwise, the growth plan would say that it has to stay the same or be higher than what it is today, which is 20%. And the county is asking for the county's target to be reduced to 15%. So more or less status quo as far as Center Wellington goes, as far as the density targets.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, that's the end of the agenda. Thank you very much, everybody. And we reconvene, I guess, on March the 2nd, but we'll see you all in the subcommittees before that. So meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
See you, everyone. Thanks.